Hi everybody, so today we're going to be talking about Crohn's disease and more specifically what causes Crohn's disease. So let's go ahead and jump into this. And basically when we have Crohn's disease, what it is it's a chronic inflammation of the digestive tract. Okay, now the digestive tract is also called the gastrointestinal tract or also known as just the GI tract. All right, so basically what this is going to cover everything from the mouth all the way down to the anus. So we're going to get chronic inflammation there. Chronic means it's something that's going to occur for a long period of time. So we get chronic inflammation or inflammation that occurs for a long period of time in the gastrointestinal tract. Okay, now it's considered an autoimmune disorder. But here's the thing about autoimmune disorders is basically normally in autoimmune disorders what the body does is it develops antibodies to your own body. So now what's going to happen is your body, your immune system looks at your body as being a disease and attacks your own body. That doesn't happen in Crohn's disease. We don't make antibodies. Instead, what's going to happen is we're going to get something that we call dysregulation of the immune system. Okay, so we get dysregulation of the immune system. And basically what's going to happen is you're going to get a hyperimmune response. So we get a hyperimmune response to things that are going on in the body, okay? So now, let's go ahead and take a look at the causes of Crohn's disease and what I'm going to cover today. So here's the causes, and basically, for the most part, they don't really know what causes Crohn's disease. It's idiopathic, right? That means unknown cause. However, what we're gonna look at is some things that can aggravate it or what's kind of common in people who have Crohn's disease is we're going to look at the effects of what we call the Western diet. All right, we're going to look at the effects of the Western diet. We're going to look at the effects of smoking. That's going to play a role. People who smoke are a lot more likely to get Crohn's disease than people who don't smoke. What's also going to happen in Crohn's disease is basically your body, your immune system is going to attack good bacteria in your digestive tract. Okay, so it's going to attack good bacteria in your digestive tract. And then the other thing that's going to happen is there's going to be a genetic component. So I actually have already done a video about the genetic component. And normally what's going to happen is we find in people, about 30% of people, they'll get something called a NOD2 mutation. And like I said, I already have a video on that. So let's go ahead and look now of the effects of these. And we're going to start with the Western diet. So if we look over here, at this right here, this is looking at my digestive tract right here, okay? This is the esophagus. The esophagus is the tube that's gonna carry food from your mouth down to your stomach. So that's the esophagus right there. Now, for the most part, Crohn's disease can affect the mouth, all right? And it's gonna create something called aphthous ulcers. I'm gonna go into symptoms of Crohn's disease in another video. But then we have the stomach. Then after food's broken down in the stomach, it goes to this red area here, and this is going to be the small intestine. Now, a lot of times where people will have symptoms from Crohn's disease is at the end of this small intestine at an area called the ileum, or this is the terminal ileum. Most of the red that you see here is actually the ileum. And this is where you do a lot of absorption of food. So this is going to be the terminal ileum right here. This is going to be the cecum right here, and that's going to play a role in this also. And to give you an idea, this brown thing right here, that's the appendix. So that gives you an idea of what we're looking at right here. So, and again, we're going to be way down here in the pelvis area. If you ever known anyone who's had appendicitis, you basically know where that's at. So I want you to look at this area. Oh, by the way, this green here is the large intestine, right? And then this is going to be your rectum, and then you have your anus. So basically, let's take a look at this. And the area we're going to be concentrating on again is at the terminal ileum. Again, it can occur anywhere in the digestive tract. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a cross section. So imagine I cut a piece of this ileum out. And the ileum is like, imagine it's like a large tube. So I'm going to take this section out here and I'm going to show it to you like this, like a tube. Or imagine it's a hose. And then I'm going to put it up here on my board. This part here is called the lumen. So if this was a hose, this would be the part the water is in. And then all this around here would be tissue that's around there, okay? And that's the opener. Lumen is just basically the opening. So now what I'm going to do is we're going to take a cross section of this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut out here and cut this section out here Imagine I pull this out and now I stick it on my board here. So let's go ahead and take a look of what's going on here. And we're going to talk about basically first how your digestive tract defends itself, or how does it keep infections from happening. So now we're looking at the inside of the digestive tract here. You're only looking at one portion of it again. Remember, I just had the bottom part here, but there would be a top part here I just don't have drawn. Imagine this part all in here is my lumen. Okay, these parts here are called the crypts of Crohn, right in there. Okay, so here's how your immune system protects itself. If you notice right here, and I only have one drawn, you're gonna have a whole bunch of this. We're gonna call this a goblet cell. And what goblet cells do is they secrete something called mucin. And mucin is kind of like saliva. And imagine that I have mucin that goes through this whole protective covering here. All right? And it's going to cover this whole thing. I'm not going to draw it the whole way, but we have mucin. Now, mucin is going to keep microbes from getting into this area here. If you notice how this says mucosa, then I have the submucosa, the muscularis externa, and the serosa. Mucin is the first line of defense against microbes getting down into this area. The second thing that's going to happen is, if you notice, see where these red lines are? Well, all of these are basically what we call epithelial cells. And these cells are actually very close together and actually kind of like pushed together. And we call those tight junctions, right? You have the same thing on your skin, right? You have these tight junctions on your skin. And what the tight junctions do is, because they're so tight, they also keep microbes from getting into this area that's down in here. If you notice down in here, I also have where these green cells are at the bottom of these crypts, and I'm going to have them down in here, right? And we're going to call these Paneth cells. And what Paneth cells do is, Paneth cells are going to release something called defensins. The way defensins works is like this. Let's say I have a bad bacteria right here, right? This is my bad bacteria. This will secrete defensins, and then what defensins will do is defensins will basically stab this. All right? And what they'll do is they'll break up the cell membrane and they kill the bad bacteria. So that's basically some of the ways that the immune system is going to protect itself. One other thing I want to add in here right now too is, in this area we have bad bacteria, right? This would be my bad bacteria. And then you have good bacteria, and they kind of keep each other in check, okay? So they keep each other in check because of the amount of resources available. None of those can really grow too much. So now let's look at what's going to happen now when someone has Crohn's disease. And let's look a little bit more about what the effect of the Western diet. So if I come over here, and happy Thanksgiving. And so here's what's going to happen, is when someone has a healthy diet, right, it's going to consist of complex carbohydrates and fiber. Now, when we have complex carbohydrates and fiber, what that's going to do is that's going to basically increase the number of good bacteria. Okay, when we have good bacteria, this is also going to increase the number of what we call short-chain fatty acids. Short-chain fatty acids are going to play a big role in the intestines, right? And what's going to happen with these short-chain fatty acids is basically what they are is they're fatty acids that are made up of less than 6 carbons. Short-chain fatty acids, what their role is first of all, they decrease the pH inside the intestines. So they make the environment more acidic. And because the environment's more acidic, certain bacteria can't grow. The other thing that short-chain fatty acids are going to do is they are going to be responsible for regulating an immune response. Okay, and I'm going to talk more about this in just a few minutes. The other thing that these are going to do is they're going to help with mucin production. They're going to help keep the tight junctions. And they play a role in what Paneth cells do. Okay, so really quick, so the good bacteria, now again, the complex carbs and fiber are going to be responsible for making the good bacteria. The good bacteria is going to use these complex carbohydrates also to make the short chain fatty acids. By the way, and the other thing that this is going to do is it's going to be responsible for epithelial cell replacement. So in other words, if we look at this here, these are my epithelial cells. Well, when they get old, the short chain fatty acids are going to play a role in replacing those. Now, let's look at what happens when someone has a bad diet, okay? The first thing that's going to happen is we said complex carbs and fiber make good bacteria, right? Well, now what's gonna happen is, let's talk about what a bad diet is. So in a Western diet, what's going to happen is you're going to have, usually people eat a lot of red meat. Red meat contains something called arachidonic acid, which can lead to inflammation. The other thing is in a Western diet, is you actually have people eat a lot of refined sugar, and they also eat a lot of processed foods. Okay. Now, what does this do? When you have a lot of sugar and you have a lot of processed foods, bad bacteria lives off of that. So now we're going to get an increase in bad bacteria, and we're going to get a decrease in good bacteria. Okay, so we're going to get a decrease in good bacteria. Now, here's what's going to happen. Because we have a decrease in good bacteria, that's going to lead to a decrease in short chain fatty acids. Okay? When we get too many bad bacteria and not enough good bacteria and they're out of balance, this is called dysbiosis. Okay, it's called dysbiosis, when we get more bad bacteria than good bacteria. So now let's take a look at how this is going to affect my gastrointestinal tract and in Crohn's disease. So the first thing we said that's going to happen is basically we're going to, if we look over at what we just had, we're going to decrease the pH, right? We're going to increase the pH. So now that we have the bad diet, we're going to increase the pH. So because we increase the pH now, more bad bacteria can survive. Right? So now I start to get more bad bacteria than good bacteria, right? It's also we can no longer regulate immune response. So normally what's going to happen is when we start to get bad bacteria, the short chain fatty acids will actually bring white blood cells, such as T cells, or macrophages, or dendritic cells, to the area. And these are going to release something called cytokines, which cause inflammation. And the cytokines they're going to release is something called interleukin 6. Interleukin 6 is actually going to activate more macrophages and dendritic cells to come to the area. There's going to have interleukin 12, and then we're going to get something called tumor necrotic factor. And these will, what they will basically do is they will go and eliminate the bad bacteria, right? Then when I don't need it anymore, my short chain fatty acids will then basically shut these off. It'll regulate the T cells and the macrophages and the dendritic cells, and it'll shut it off after it's done its job. Well, what's going to happen now when you have a bad diet is, even though this may have done its job, these will still continue to secrete these cytokines here, causing chronic inflammation. So let's reiterate one more time. When we have too much bacteria, your short chain fatty acids are going to signal for T cells, macrophages, dendritic cells, and other white blood cells to come to the area. When they come to the area, they're going to also secrete something called cytokines, which cause inflammation. The cytokines are going to be interleukin 6, interleukin 12, and tumor necrotic factor. So we're going to get those. Now remember, interleukin 6 calls over even more macrophages, more dendritic cells. This is actually going to secrete something called intrinsic factor, and then this is going to cause inflammation and fever also. And they're going to eliminate this, which they should. But then when we're done, we need this to stop, and because we don't have the short chain fatty acids like we should because of bad diet, these will continue to be activated and they're going to cause problems. So the next thing that's going to happen is our mucin, right? We said that short chain fatty acids help make mucin. Well, if we don't have short chain fatty acids, what's going to happen is this mucin layer is going to go away. And now we've lost our line of defense, right? So now what's going to happen is because of that, now we're getting, and don't forget, we're still continuing to get the bad bacteria because everything else going on, even though we have an immune response, right? We're going to continue to get more bad bacteria. The next thing that's going to happen is these tight junctions. Because of the fact that we're not turning over cells like we should, remember we said short chain fatty acids is responsible for cell turnover, we're going to actually start to get openings in the intestines, and now my bad bacteria is going to start to come into these areas in here. So now I'm starting to get more bad bacteria inside of here, which is now what's that going to do? That's going to create more T cells to come over. And it's going to create more macrophages to come over. And it's going to create more dendritic cells to come over. So now I'm starting to get an increase in the inflammation that's in there. The other thing that's going to happen is my Paneth cells are no longer going to make defensins. If I don't have the short chain fatty acids, I don't make the defensins. Without that now, more of my bacteria can grow. Right, so there we go. And so now we start to get even more bacteria, okay? And again, so because we're not getting the epithelial cell, these are going to start to wither and become old, and I get more leaky, and then I'm going to have bacteria coming in. Now let's take a look at the effect of smoking that it's going to have on my intestines also, and on my gastrointestinal tract. So what happens is, in the body, one more thing too, is don't forget, we changed the pH, like I said, so it becomes more basic, which is going to allow for more cellular growth. So what happens in the body is when people, basically, you have free radicals, right? Let's use brown. Here's my free radicals, okay? You have free radicals that are going to be in the body from different things, right? Free radicals are basically molecules that are highly reactive. So we have free radicals, but then your body also produces something called antioxidants. And your antioxidants will neutralize these free radicals. Well, when people smoke, they increase the number of free radicals. So now I'm starting to get a whole bunch of free radicals in here. When this occurs, and you're getting a lot of free radicals, this will lead to the formation of what we call ROS. ROS stands for reactive oxygen species. Okay, reactive oxygen species. And then what's going to happen is, because we have these free radicals making the ROS, this is going to lead to something called oxidative stress. So oxidative stress is when I have more free radicals than antioxidants. So what happens now? With these ROS, what these are going to do, these are going to be molecules that basically have oxygen attached to them. There's the oxygen, right? And we're going to start making more and more of these. All right? And then what they're going to do is this. Remember those epithelial cells we were talking about? Well, I'm going to take one out here, and this is going to be my epithelial cell now. And on the cell membrane, we have something called electrons. These are highly reactive, and what they're going to do is they're going to start stealing these electrons. And because they start stealing these electrons, what happens is these cells also start to break down. And they're going to start to break down. And because they start to break down now, we're going to get that leakiness just like you saw in everything else. So now what's going to happen is, one other thing I forgot to mention is the immune system also, smoking is also responsible for weakening the immune system. Because it weakens the immune system, remember we get that dysbiosis, or the increase in bad bacteria in comparison to good bacteria. So now I'm getting more bad bacteria because smoking has weakened the immune system. I get the leak in, and now that comes into this area in here. So now I'm getting more bad bacteria again in here. So what does that do? Well, because the immune system's been weakened and the bacteria is growing, right? Because that's happening now, it's going to create a hyperimmune response. So it's kind of like the immune system's playing catch up now, and it overdoes it. So here comes my white blood cells again, and they start to secrete a whole bunch of cytokines again. Remember, the cytokines are the interleukins and things like that. But it overdoes it now, right? It'll probably clear this out, but it's gonna overdo it because of the fact that it's trying to play catch up and kill those. So that's how smoke is going to affect it, right? We're gonna weaken the immune system. We're gonna get damage to the intestines. We're gonna get the bad bacteria coming into here, and then there's an overreaction leading to an increase in inflammation. The next thing that's gonna happen is inside of here, we have actually something called E. coli. And for the most part, we want E. coli in our intestines because they actually play a role in maintaining the intestines and vitamin formation and things such as that. So we get E. coli here. And on E. coli, there's actually a protein that's on here. So this is going to be my protein right here. And this is called OMPC. That's my OMPC protein. Now, normally what's going to happen is when we have this in here like we want, you're going to have your T cells come by. So I'm going to draw that in black. We're going to have our T cells come by. And the T cells will actually bind to this OMPC protein. And then it's going to release something called interleukin 10. Interleukin 10 leads to a decrease in inflammation. Well, in people who have Crohn's disease, what's going to happen is they don't produce this interleukin 10 when this T cell binds to this OMPC. So in this case, we're not getting this. And therefore, what's going to happen is we're not going to get the decrease in inflammation. So let's go like this. There's interleukin 10 is not released, and therefore it's going to lead to an increase in inflammation. Now, all this increase in inflammation and all of that, because it keeps going on, even after it's done the job it's supposed to do, it's going to continue to damage this. So a cycle starts, right? I had this started, I'm getting bacteria in here, I'm getting an increase in bacteria, I'm getting my immune system attacking, the immune system's not turning off when it should, and what it's going to do is it's going to start destroying the good tissue I have. So eventually, this is going to come and it's going to start to eat away at the intestinal lining. And what we call this here, and then we got a bunch of inflammation. So I'm going to use this for inflammation. Right, that's all my inflammation that's in there, and I've eaten away. So we're going to call this a transmural ulcer. So a transmural ulcer is going to go basically from the mucosa to the serosa, right? It can actually go through it too, and I'll talk about that later on. But anyways, that's what's going to happen there. Is because of the inflammation, it continues to eat this away at the intestinal line of there. All right, so we talked about our short-chain fatty acids, the effects of diet. We talked about the effects of smoking. We talked about attacking our good bacteria. Like I said, I have another video which I talk about genetics and NOD2 mutations and the effects those can have. One more thing I want to talk about real fast. Sometimes what will happen too is because I start to get bacteria in here, what will happen is your white blood cells will actually start to form layers around this. They'll start to form layers around the bacteria just to try to contain it. So let's just say this black is all immune cells. All right, and they do this, like I said, just to try to contain it, and we call this a granuloma. Okay, so that's another thing that your body's going to do to try to fight this off. Anyways, that's it for these effects of Crohn's disease or causes of Crohn's disease. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you liked the video, please hit the like and subscribe button, and we will catch you next time.